We Outdoors Nation, today we are privileged to welcome a celebrated outdoor photographer to the podcast in the name of Mr. Brandon Neubert. Brandon, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Rob. It's great to meet with you today. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And I love how Zoom can have me sat in South Africa and you sat in Utah, and yet this conversation can happen. It's just so bloody incredible.
It is incredible. I mean, especially during times like this, I connect with, friends and family, and also with you, and completely different continents and hemispheres, and it works so beautifully. So
it is. We just have to juggle the time zones around, but life is amazing. So tell me, how did you get into loving the outdoors as much as you do?
That's not a hard question. Growing up, I spent a lot of time with my family out camping. I like to tell people I pretty much grew up in our tent trailer, and we spent a lot of times in the deserts of Utah, and we would just drive our tent trailer wherever we wanted to go, whether it was Glacier National Park or somewhere in California or Oregon or the deserts of southern Utah. I spent a lot of time out hiking with my family, and even just young, I remember just driving out in the middle of nowhere, probably where we weren't supposed to be, but just parking, and we would time it to see how fast we could go. I'm sure that was my dad's way of getting us to help set up the camper. But always camping and hiking. Every summer was a new summer to explore somewhere new.
That's incredible. Now, kids often end up going one of two directions. Either they follow their parents' passion or they go the polar opposite direction. So what was it about the outdoors that stuck inside of you to get you to follow your parents' direction as opposed to going somewhere completely new?
I've never thought of that. I've always just had this, I've always had this love of the outdoors, and just it's not something that ever really left me. And I have images of myself camping growing up, just around a campfire, or sitting in the car, in a car seat. I have an image in a field of wildflowers in a meadow with my grandmother. She's holding a camera up to my face, and just seeing new places. I think a lot of it, exploring the outdoors, is just the escape from normal routine. And especially now as an adult, the monotony of having a day job or something like that. The outdoors is really just an escape from reality into a better reality, I guess.
Yeah. I often think that the outdoors is reality and the rest of it's all make-believe.
I think that's I think that's totally true.
I don't think as human beings we were designed to live in cities with lots of noise and hustle and bustle about us. But for some reason we seem to persecute ourselves and make ourselves live in these horrible cities. But there we go.
That could totally be. I do enjoy my day job, but I definitely enjoy going on a camping trip much more than going to work every day.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I'm lucky that the outdoors is my work. But even so, as I said before we hit record, I drive a MacBook far too much these days, and I don't drive my hiking boots anywhere near enough. So what was that transition of going from loving the outdoors to wanting to document what the outdoors through the lens of a camera?
Well, growing up, I was always the child who liked to carry the camera, and that was probably pretty annoying to my family, to my parents. But as I mentioned, I have that image of my grandmother holding a camera up to my face, and I was just little at that age. I couldn't have been more than 3 years old when that picture was taken. But I just always liked to take a picture of something. And all through my childhood years, especially when digital came out, and I could take as many pictures as I wanted without fear of running out the roll of film, it was just a really exciting thing. I mean, you see a beautiful cliff or a pretty little flower or a bear or some other wildlife. You take a picture of it and you get to keep that memory forever. And photography is really the business of collecting memories. And that's, well, collecting and sharing memories too with others. And as I grew up, I got better and better, and my photography really started improving after I had begun college and practicing a little bit more. And so it's been a constant process, and I like to think I've improved in all that time. So
Yeah, you've come through. You mentioned the transition of analog to digital photography.
mhm.
Photography, the barrier to entry for photography has reduced dramatically over the past 30 years, 25 years. Whereas, previously, before maybe 2000, I'm not too sure when digital photography first properly arrived, but the expense of the camera and then publishing or getting printed your film, and not getting to learn instantaneously about whether that was a good shot or not, because you take it and then maybe in a week's time you see the results of the photo, and then you've got to go and figure out what setting you used and so on and so forth. Do you think the quality of photography has improved dramatically because of that transition?
Well, I think the best way to talk about this is I talked about these trips, and there were several trips when we would purchase the little pocket cameras, the little disposable cameras where you go click, 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 and then you get a picture. I remember each of us, me and my brothers, we would have one camera, and that camera would have maybe 24 images on it. And so I remember being very careful as a kid not to just squander those dozen images through the trip. And so having that patience, I really believe that patience is the most important technical tool in every photographer's camera bag. Because without patience, you may come home with a lot of images, but they may not necessarily be good images. And the best images come from a lot of waiting and a lot of sitting and watching and just being mindful of the way the light is moving or the animal is walking or what time of day it is.
Okay. So for folks out there, we are going to jump into the how to get better pictures of your trips. But so with patience, I presume, comes planning beforehand.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It all of my trips are planned with a mind towards photography. And I do make it a very big point to go to a location and photograph it at specific times. When I visited Rome, I had a shooting itinerary of wanting to capture a very specific shot at a very specific time. And this image wouldn't have worked out if we'd been there in the middle of the day. It wouldn't have been nearly as interesting had it been too late either. But because I had done that planning beforehand, it really worked out.
Yeah, that's interesting. So because people always struggle, don't they, to share with their family and friends who don't come in the outdoors with them the true beauty of whatever they see, and yet often people try and get their images, I'm going to guess, at like 11:30 in the morning, full sun. They've already hiked for 4 hours and a bit tired, and then they try and get that perfect shot. And I'm going to guess you're going to suggest that maybe that's not the best strategy.
It's a strategy that it's not the best strategy, but it's one I've used several times. That's for sure. And yeah, after hiking so many hours, you do forget to take certain shots and you do forget to do certain things, maybe capture something on video, or you kind of rush through an image. But I don't know, with constant practice, when you're thrown into those scenarios, you do get better and better at being able to take a good image in the moment.
So what's some of your what are some of the things that you think get in the way of people taking great images? Obviously, we've got some planning and patience, but I've got a Canon 50D, which isn't the best camera in the world, but it's not the worst camera in the world either.
That was actually my first camera purchase in college, was the Canon 50D.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible camera for an average Joe like me who doesn't have any real idea what he's doing. But what has struck me with it is that everybody I talk to really complicates all the settings. And geez, and I've always had this emotional turmoil of having it on like the green square of automatic and just going for it, to this inner guilt that maybe I should be fiddling with the white balance or manual or something like that. Like, how do we move from the green auto setting through to fiddling with the rest?
Oftentimes you don't need to leave the green auto setting, but I do say that I don't know that I've ever used it once on my current camera, but but the green auto setting is just a great setting that will capture all of the data. I think the most important thing, and something important to remember, how can I phrase this well? You see, when you shoot on film, you take your negatives and you take them into the darkroom and you develop your image. And a lot of people don't know this, but Ansel Adams was a master at developing his images and the chemical process. And you could even argue that he was the father of Photoshop. Now, cameras like the Canon 50D or my Olympus EM1 Mark II, they capture in a mode called RAW. And that captures a lot of data. But you can then take that data, that negative, and you can take it into Adobe Lightroom or the digital darkroom, and then you can edit it to make it look as realistic or as fantasy-like as you like. And I always strive for realism in my images. And so if I can get that good exposure that I'm looking for, and if I've captured it in that raw format, and if I have that knowledge of how to develop the image properly, then I can expect to get a good image out of it. But it takes a lot of practice. There's no one-click filter. There's no one-click auto enhance feature for this kind of work. It just requires a lot of time and learning and practice. And it's something you can do yourself. YouTube is an amazing resource, but with time, I think that's what matters the most.
So it sounds to me a little bit like what you're saying is you can get a 3/4 good enough image and then use the digital, what did you call it? Digital darkroom of Photoshop or whatever it might be, to go and then bring that image to what you want to, because the camera's already captured as many of the components as could ever be possible.
Yes. The camera's one purpose is to capture data. And if you have a good knowledge of how to capture that data properly, then you can take the image the rest of the way, the other 25% in the digital darkroom.
So let's keep going down that rabbit hole, because you've used the word properly. Sure. You've used the word properly twice, and then I was like, "Oh my God, there's a proper way of doing it!" Like, come on, let's unpack properly.
Well, sometimes the auto feature will do it properly, and sometimes it gets you good enough. I mean, the auto feature will make sure that will do its best to make sure that the blacks aren't too dark or that the lights aren't too dark. We've all seen those pictures of a bright foreground, but the sky is completely white, or a beautiful sunset, but the ground is completely black. Scenarios like that are times when you need to know how to use the settings on your camera before you can take a really good image. Before all of this, though, a good composition, I think. I mean, even if you don't shoot in RAW, even if you shoot with the automatic camera setting, if you don't know how to compose a good image in the first place, then your images aren't going to turn out to be what you had hoped for. cameras are great for capturing quick memories, but when you carefully compose an image with patience, then when you actually capture that data, be it auto or just shooting JPEG or not, it will turn out to be a good image.
And by compose, you're meaning the right a balance of maybe the sky, the foreground, and the background that looks good to your eye. Is that right?
Yeah, you might put some rocks in the foreground and trees in the middle, and then tall mountains in the top, and it'll be good. But then you look to your left, and you see there's a river winding through, and you think, oh, if I take a few steps over this way, then I can get that river, and it leads straight into the scene. Or you might see some wildflowers, and you think, oh, I can put this wildflower right in the front of the foreground, and I'll have the river behind it, and then I'll have the mountains in the top. And then if I wait just 30 minutes, if I just sit still with this perfect composure, with this perfect composition for 30 more minutes, the sun will come up behind me and it will light up the mountains out in the beyond. And that's what I mean by composing an image is slowing down, taking in the environment, and thinking about the scene. What makes this place so special? And if you can arrange those elements carefully, then no matter what your camera settings are, as long as they're close, then you'll get a very special image.
Cool. Okay, I love it. I love it. I'm envisaging myself, by the way, now going outside, maybe back to the mountains where I was the other week, and just spending a weekend camping in one place and not moving very far, and just observing the way the sun moves over things and the way that the animals move through things, and then almost feels like I'd need to spend half a day or a day just observing the sunrise through to the sunset before actually even starting to take images, if the primary motive is to get decent images.
Yes, and if I can share this briefly with you.
Oh yeah,
I just thought of this image here. Now this image right here is a very special image, and it kind of talks about those different pieces, because I had visited this location here. This image was shot on my 14th visit to this location, I think.
Wow.
13th or 14th visit. And it took a lot of visits because either the wind was blowing and there was no reflection, or there were no clouds in the sky, or there were clouds in the east and they blocked the sun from rising on the mountains. And I would frequently get there and there was someone in my spot that I wanted to take the image from. And so finally, after enough visits, I finally made it to this spot. I got my spot and the conditions were good. And sometimes you need to visit your locations multiple times before you can finally get the image that you're really looking for.
Okay, cool. Damn it, I love it. When I talk to people who are genuine masters at their craft, what I really like is I get really good advice, but the problem is the advice is not always the advice I want.
No, I suppose not.
Because everybody
sometimes you get lucky.
Yeah, everybody wants the silver bullet of whip out your iPhone, point, click, and you're going to get the best shot ever, and it's just not the truth.
And sometimes that can happen. Maybe I'll share this one here with you to give you a little bit of hope. This one was shot in Switzerland, in the city of Interlaken. If I can just have a moment. Or I'm sorry, not Interlaken, in Lauterbrunnen.
Oh, right, okay.
Let's go ahead and pull it up. Oh, not this one. Whoops. This one. There we go. This image, I cannot overemphasize how lucky I was. I shot this out of a moving train window.
What?
And the light was perfect, and I could see there was a gap coming up in the trees. And I looked at my mom and I said, "Mom, you need to look ahead and tell me when there's going to be a gap in the trees." And I set my camera as best as I could with the manual settings. And she timed me. She said, "Ready, right now. And I went click, 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 click. I took maybe 12 images before my window was over. And I had very little time to be careful about my exposure. But of course, the image worked out, and it's one of my favorite images from that entire trip. And so sometimes you just get lucky and you fall into the right spot and you're ready and you can just take it.
It's funny that the story behind the image actually adds huge amounts of character to the image.
It does. Every single one of my images either has a story of excitement, if it was raining or thundering or something like that, or if I was in a train window, or it has a story of just being patient and revisiting a location over and over again, or waiting for hours and hours for the sun to come out. And that's one of the fun parts of photography.
That's wow. Okay, so so far from here, I've taken some planning, some patience, and maybe quite a lot of repetition to go and get those images. Now, in when you get more adventurous in the outdoors, and the environment gets more challenging. So last night I was talking to a mountain guide who guides on Everest. Would be a great example. And I've had other girls who I interviewed the other week who've sailed all the way around the world. And we all come to this central point of when it gets scariest is often the opportunity to get the best images, because that's when the waves are at their biggest or the environment's at its rawest. But equally, it's also a white knuckle ride. You're gripping on and holding on for your life. You don't want to pull a camera out. But that's a challenge I don't want you to answer. But it is a reality.
Well, I don't know how I could stand up to an expedition on Everest, but I do think that there's a speck of truth to that, to be sure.
He was talking about the balance of the wind and blue sky and sunlight refracting through or reflecting through ice crystals as they were flying through the air and what it looks like. But equally, when it's that cold and the wind's blowing that much, you don't want to take your hand off anything and touch a camera. You just want to hold tight.
No, I would recommend being a little wise in those situations.
It's better to stay alive. But whenever I've taken photos of my scariest moments in the outdoors, it's normally involved water and normally involved big waves. But every time I take that picture, the camera seems to take the wave height and turn it from being, 40 feet in height and make it look like 10 feet. You get home and you're like, wow, you have to see how big it was. And everybody goes, no, that looks tiny. And I know how big it was. So what is there we can do to go and get and show real perspective about how flipping big and scary the outdoors could be on occasions?
I think that's a matter of perspective. Different lenses take pictures in different ways. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to make something as big as a 40-foot wave look tiny. And, fortunately, a lot of these nicer smartphones today have these 3 different lenses. They have their super wide, their normal, and their telephoto lenses. And of course, cameras like your Canon and my Olympus, we also have those selections of lenses. But I think a great way to show the enormity of nature is to just be mindful of what you're using to take your picture with. And again, this does come down a lot to experience. If you use a wide angle lens, then what you're saying is your most important elements are right in front of you within at most 10 to 12 feet or 3 meters or so. And if you shoot with a telephoto lens, you're saying that the most important features are in the distance. And at first that you think, oh, that makes sense. If something's far away, I'll zoom in on it. And if something's really close, then I'll get wide. But in cases like the 40-foot wave, you may need to use a tighter lens to get a little closer, even though it means cutting off some of your image. But in addition to that, if you can show something in the foreground that will show perspective, that's also a great way. If you're looking at a ginormous mountain peak, if you include a little tiny person in there, not too small, but just big enough, that can add a lot of perspective to your images. And people say, "Wow, if that 5 foot, 6 foot tall person is that small, then how big is that thing that they're standing in front of?" So I think those two things right there can help take better images of the enormity of the outdoors.
Yeah, I love that about getting something else in the image that can, if a car, a tree, a person, anything, just to go and show somebody like it really was big. Um,
Exactly.
I also think that the thing that photography does to a degree is it takes the emotion out of the experience. And that's not to say you can't take images that have emotion in them, but the emotion you're feeling when the wave is really big or when the wind is really strong or whatever it might be is a different emotion to what the camera will capture. Um, and so you may feel like it's terrifying and huge, but maybe it was more you than it was the size of the outdoors. Maybe it was more in your head. I don't know. Yeah, what we experience and what's real may not always be the same thing, I suppose.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to get into video so much,
Mm.
because you're absolutely right. A still image can only present so much, and the danger that you're experiencing can only appear so scary in an image, but a video can really bring those things to life. And when you're making videos, the same rules apply as taking a good picture. You want to make sure you've got a good composition. You want to make sure that your scale is right. Maybe put a person in there to present the enormity of your real subject. But when you add that motion that video comes in, and you see rain droplets hitting the front of your lens, or you see the clouds rolling through in something like a time lapse, or even if it's just a beautiful sunny day, uh, a picture's worth 1,000 words, but a video is 30 pictures per second. And so, how many words does that represent? You tell me.
That is very true. Never thought about a video like that. 30 pictures a second. Yeah. Okay. I love a new perspective on the world. So while we jump into the video aspect, you disappeared off a couple of years ago and went and hiked the Holt route in French and Swiss Alps.
Yes.
How did that come about as a project?
So my father has actually gone on several trips with his wife, and they've taken their tandem bicycle to Europe a few times. And he was very excited to film it with his GoPro and with pictures. And he did a brilliant job of putting together some very fun videos. And after seeing him and watching others on YouTube with their amazing travel films, I thought, I go on some things that people might really find interest in. And I had gone on little trips before. I had tried to take good videos before. I had a solo trip in New Zealand that I tried, and I haven't used any footage from. Um, but I wanted the Oat route to be something very special, because I knew that a trip of that length was something really special. And so I did a lot of planning. I did a lot of research on camera hardware, and I had experience in the past working on working on different things for nonprofit organizations and sports teams and other marketing material for a river rafting company. And I said, let's do this. And so throughout the Oat route, I made videos as much of a priority as I made pictures. And I'm so pleased with the way it came out. And even to the point of getting a little emotional about it, because it was the best work that I could do. I worked very hard on it, and I wanted to make something that would inspire people to get out into the outdoors and would share the magic of my experience with them. And I really think I was able to do that. So
Wow. And it's an incredible hike to hike just without taking pictures and video, hey?
yeah, it was. It was. And you mentioned earlier about hiking so many hours and then you get to your campsite or somewhere and how tired you are. And that's what I was talking about. It's you get there and you're tired, and so it's hard to remain focused in that photographic or video mindset. But you got to remain focused and ready, even though you're so tired. But yeah, um,
And
for
I bet
people who don't
you add
know,
a bunch of miles to your day every day because you've got to get those images where you walk past the camera off into the distance, and then you put your pack down, come back and get the camera. And I bet you could add 5 miles to a day quite easily.
oh, I made my brother do that. Yeah, but you know what? He loved it, and he was excited to be on the journey. And he's a cross country runner, very very athletic, and he was happy. And we had a great system of I would hold his pack, he'd unclip it, and jaunter down and pick up the camera and come back, and then we'd keep going. We got very efficient at it. But I definitely owe him a lot for both doing that and for carrying so much equipment during the trip to help make that production a reality. So
I was going to ask, like, how big or heavy were your packs? Because that's a lot of batteries and camera gear to lug on already quite a long big
I
hike.
can on that trip I took my Olympus and an ultra wide lens and then kind of a travel lens, a professional travel lens. But we also took two little pocket cameras, the Olympus Tough cameras. And I also brought a little drone, the Mavic Air.
Oh,
And
wow.
altogether, both of our packs weighed 22 and a half pounds. I don't know how many grams that is, but it was 22 and a half pounds.
It's 11-ish
And,
kilos. That's pretty light, actually.
It was. We made some sacrifices in order to make them that light. We carried a little less clothing. We carried I don't know. We sacrificed a couple of comforts in order to make the weight work, but we weren't disappointed that we had left anything behind, and we were very happy at what we had brought. So it was a perfect loadout for that kind of a trip.
What's the one part of that trip that you just like to go and sit down and never leave? I bet that there's got to be a bit of the trip where you just want to sit down and go, oh.
I could come up with one of those days on that trip for I could come up with a place for every single one of our days on the trek. I mean, the Swiss Alps are just an incredible place, and the landscape is so dynamic, and it's always changing and shifting in the weather. But in general, up in Sunega near Zermatt at the end of our trek, I could just stay there for weeks and weeks. The area surrounding Montfort, like Verbier or the Sentier de Chamois, that's a beautiful hike along the side of the mountain. And that trip was difficult because it would both be soul filling and soul crushing, because you would turn a corner and it would fill your soul with the landscape, but then you'd have to turn and continue walking because there is a destination in mind. And you do know that there's something new around the next corner, but at the same time you do just want to stay.
Yeah, I've got friends who went to go and work for a summer in Switzerland, and that was 23 years ago, and they've never left Switzerland. I'm serious. One of my really good friends, James, there's a whitewater river called the Vorderrhein in southern Switzerland, almost on the border with Italy, actually. And he went there to go and guide a raft for a summer and teach some canoeing. And yeah, that was 23 years ago, and never left. never left. And when you go to where he lives, I'd imagine it's like some of that hike, because every single hour of every day is completely different and just as amazingly beautiful. When it's stormy and horrible, it's beautiful. When it's blue sky and sunshine, it's beautiful. And everything in between is beautiful. He's like, why would I ever want to leave?
It's a great question. We actually did meet someone on the trail during the route who actually had moved from America to France, just on the French-Swiss border. And he said that on a visit, they loved it so much, and he transitioned his physical training business into being online, and he and his wife had made the move to Switzerland. I can totally see how someone would get that sucked in so much. I may end up there myself someday. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm incredibly jealous of people who can say, "I live here and I never want to leave." That for me is, and not because that's because not because it's the city they were born in or the city they went to university in or any of that other stuff. But it is. I've got a friend who lives in Seattle. And he said, "Rob, why would I ever want to live anywhere else? Seattle's got the sea, it's got mountains, it's got cliffs, it's got animals, it's got lakes, rivers, it's got everything I could ever want. Why would I ever want to live anywhere else?" And having spent quite a lot of time in the Cascades and in Seattle, I can just have to agree. Cool.
Yes.
So
living in Jackson was that way. I mentioned driving the bus for a couple of summers away from university. I really did fall in love with that place, and that's why I went back to live a second summer and then a third summer working at a hotel in Jackson. So some places you just can't escape from. So
that's it. They keep drawing you back.
Yeah.
So if people want to check out your film of the Holt routes in French Swiss Alps, whereabouts do they go check it out? Because I want to go check it out.
I recommend it. Well, obviously I recommend it. I made it.
Yeah.
So, I think it's great. Who knows what it really is. But no, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, and it's visible on my YouTube channel. You can find it at YouTube. Maybe I'll pull up my channel just right here.
Do it.
There we go.
I have several major trips in the pipeline.
There we go. Lots of buttons and things to navigate. But this is my channel on YouTube. It's the Journey of Brandon, or Journey with Brandon. And right here on the front page is Hiking the Out Route, a full-length adventure film through Switzerland. And so if ever you're struggling on Netflix to find something to watch, or if you're looking for if you're looking for adventure, I recommend giving it a shot.
Cool. People, I'll put the description in the link below. Or correction, my blimey, the link in the description below. My brain is going. And folks, go check it out on YouTube. I actually think that given enough time, YouTube could well become a replacement for Netflix, as the quality of people's content that goes on YouTube is just getting better and better and better. You could entertain yourself for weeks on YouTube and never get bored.
I follow a lot of great YouTubers, and I can easily go on any day and watch something about cars. I could watch something about photography. I could watch something about just travel. Very well could.
Awesome. So what's next in your photography journey? What's up and coming?
Well, I have 5. That's hard. Some people may have heard that we're in the middle of a pandemic. Travel's a little tricky right now. But someday the world will normalize. I have 5 places in mind right now. I'd like to go to Iceland. I'd like to do some of the great walks of New Zealand. I'd like to go to Japan and do some cherry blossoms there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I would like to there's a trail in Scotland called the Sky Trail that I want to go and visit. And then finally, there's a Patagonia where I'd like to visit. And my brother will probably join me on several of these trips, I'm sure. We had such a great time together in Switzerland. But for now, I've got those 5 in the pipeline. And just like the Oat Route, I want to produce a film just like it, because each of these places is unique in its culture and its style and the landscape. And so if I can add these 5 films over the course of the next few years, then I'll be extremely happy with myself. I think it's a good goal to shoot for.
I think it's incredible. And you do realize that, or you probably do realize, every single one of those places you just mentioned, there's, jeepers, you could go back to each one of those places 10 times and still not have captured everything or seen everything or experienced everything.
I know. I could go back to Switzerland and do the Tour de Mont Blanc. I could go to Italy and do, the Via Alta through the Dolomites. And so many of these places you can return to over and over again, and they'll continue to reward you. And that's part of the beauty of travel and getting out into the outdoors, is there's always something new around the next corner.
There is. And we end up scratching the surface. If you head further east in Europe, into especially Romania, is absolutely incredible. It is ridiculously cheap to travel or spend any time in Romania. I mean, probably 10% of what it would cost in the US to go somewhere and spend time somewhere. It's so cheap, it's ridiculous. But the history.
Don't make it harder for me. I've already got 5 places in mind.
I'm going to add 6 for you. And why not come to South Africa, where I am as well, whilst you're in it, and come and see some big animals and some big mountains at the same time. We'll just keep filling your bucket list for the next 20 years. It's no problem.
I would love to. That would just be a blast.
Well, you're always welcome. We're not short of large animals and amazing vistas here in South Africa. The only thing we're short of is history, because the sort of colonized, is that a word? Civilized? I don't know. South Africa's quite colonized, I think is the word. My vocabulary has gone to pot today. It's quite new. It's only 100 to 200 years old. But in terms of mountains and elephants, there's more than you could ever wish to see. It's very, very, very cool. And Romania didn't get hit too hard in the Second World War, which is why I mention it. So you have a huge amount of very, very old historic buildings that are still preserved, and alpine-sized mountains, and not a lot of Western Europeans there either. People don't seem to go there very often. I think maybe the language barrier is a problem, but oh my goodness gracious me.
I think there are a lot of Roman remains that are up in Romania as well. Mm-hmm. Some atriums, if I'm thinking of the right place, at least.
Yep. And stuff that dates back to just after Rome as well. So, several thousands of years old. It's just, incredible. So, look, many people want to go and follow in your footsteps. They want to go and get some cameras and start traveling more. Maybe they want to transition from having a job to turning it into a career. What sort of advice do you have for those people?
Well, I would say my first piece of advice is don't quit your day job right away. It takes a long time before you can transition something like this into a full-time job. And I may never make that transition, either because of a lack of time or from a lack of interest, maybe. It can be very hard to make yourself marketable and to be discovered. The internet's such a big place, and we've talked about how has digital photography made it easier before. It has in the way of taking pictures and the multitude of pictures, but it's also increased the level of competition astronomically. And there's so many talented people out there in the world. And it can be very difficult to make that transition. And it's something that would happen very slowly. But I think that the people who are the most successful, or that I've watched become successful, are the people who are passionate about what they do, and they're not passionate about turning it into some kind of money scheme. You watch someone on YouTube and you can see if they're passionate about their work or if they're just trying to make a quick buck. And the difference in quality and authenticity and enthusiasm and excitement is very stark between these two groups of people. And so I would say to anyone wishing to get better or to put their stuff out there, take pictures and have fun and go on adventures and take pictures and video and throw a stupid video on YouTube every once in a while, even knowing if no one's going to do it, because it's good practice anyway, and you're having fun doing it. And eventually, under the right conditions, you can definitely become someone that people look forward to watching on YouTube.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. Most of my guests, I ask a similar question to, and last night's guest, Rolf Ustra, has guided Everest. He's been up guided on all the biggest peaks in the world. And I asked him the question of, how do you get to become a guy who can guide on Mount Everest? Like, how? Because that's no ordinary feat. And he said that the moment you try and turn it into your job is almost underneath your own volition, is almost the moment you limit yourself. He said, in his opinion, for mountaineering, go mountaineering, love mountaineering, do it often enough. Don't ever think about money. And when you're good enough, somebody will offer you the opportunity to make money from it and turn it into a job. But he said that if you chase the cash first, you probably aren't going to get. You'll do some mountain guiding, but you probably won't be guiding on Everest. And it sounds in a similar sort of vein. That's exactly what you're saying about photography.
It is. It's exactly what I'm saying. People who, and we've already talked a lot about the patience and the time that's required in learning. There's no part of this that can really come quick. If you spend $15,000 on a camera today, you're going to take the same exact pictures that you took the day before, and it's not going to do you any good. What's so more important than the equipment you have is the time that you put in, and the more you care about it, the more time you're going to put in, and you're going to enjoy it regardless.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd really love one day to be like the Joe Rogan of the outdoor photography of the outdoor world. I'd really love to do that. But I'm also well aware that he's been doing it for 10 or 11 years, that he's got 5,500 interviews or hours, 5,500 hours of content released. And even if you know the path that somebody who you aspire to be like, even if you know that what their path is that they've trodden, one of the things that all of us have to do is go and say, how long did it take that person? And if it took that person 20 years to get that level of celebrity or that level of professionalism or whatever it may be, maybe you can shortcut that timeline by half because you don't have to make all the mistakes that they made. You can learn from them, but nevertheless, half of 20 years is till 10 years just practicing your art and waiting for the time to be right. And I'm not saying we should give away our future to some quirky time is right philosophy. Like you have to take a degree of control and put yourself out there, but yeah, I think it just takes time.
Mm-hmm. It does. And again, I'm not the best example because I'm not a full-time filmmaker.
Mm.
But there are all kinds of steps that happen. I mean, everyone's YouTube, for example, everyone's YouTube channel starts with 0 subscribers. And that's true for everyone from big people like maybe Joe Rogan or Mr. Beast, and it's true for little people like me.
Yep.
But you have to get excited about the little victories, because if you get 10 subscribers on YouTube, that's 10 people that liked your content enough that they want to see more, and that's extremely encouraging. And then you get 25, and then you get 100, and slowly you begin to improve and your content gets better and better, and that 25 becomes 100. Or even now I'm blown away that I'm reaching even 500 subscribers. And that slow growth is inspirational, and you can't look at yourself and say, I only have 500 subscribers, I'm a nobody. But rather, 500 subscribers, that fills a movie theater with people that want to watch what you're making. And that's extremely exciting and encouraging. And keeping that perspective is very, very important.
That's it. I often say to people when I'm working with them, if you put money in a bank account or a savings account of some sort, and you were to get a growth of 15% in a year, you would be absolutely over the moon delighted on 15%, return on investment every year. You'd be over the moon. And so if your social media account or your YouTube account grows by 15% this year, maybe we should view it like it was cash in the bank. And you'd be delighted with that return on your money. So let's be delighted with that on a YouTube channel or a Facebook account or a business or whatever it may well be, because 15% year in, year out is a massive return and a massive growth in any other factor apart from people's patience around becoming a professional photographer or a professional mountain guide or whatever else.
And I think if it's something that you really want to do, the worst you can do is to stop and give up. And if that's something that crosses your mind, maybe you try it for a while and it's not your gig, maybe that's okay to just stop and pursue something else instead. There's no shame in wanting to be successful in something else. But if you do continue down that path, the growth is logarithmic. People take it and it just starts to grow, and YouTube sees that people like your content, or people see your images and they might start wanting to buy them. And it does just slowly build on itself. Just like you said, it's a return every year.
Yeah.
And if you had 15% growth every single year, within 10 years, you would be there.
That's it. And it's interesting. I think that we get very obsessed with having to do something having to be a full-time photographer, as opposed to saying, actually, I've got a 9 to 5 job, and photography is what I do in my vacations, in my evenings and my weekends. I interviewed the other week a guy called Mick Fowler, who's one of the world's leading mountaineers. He's actually, I think he's 68 or 69 now. And he's been one of the world's leading mountaineers for the past 45 years. I mean, he's been up all the big mountains in the world. He's climbed mountains that nobody else has ever climbed in their tens. And yet, almost all of his working life, he worked for the UK's version of the IRS, for the tax office. And when it came to like pay rise, time of year and whatever else, he often negotiated not having a pay rise for extra vacation days. And, he said he played that game for 30 years. So one year he'd take the pay rise, and the next year he'd negotiate the pay rise against some extra vacation days, and then so on and so forth for 30 years. And there's a guy who climbed one of the biggest sort of 6,000 to 8,000 meter peaks in the world every year for 35 years. He did that while having a full-time job, and he's one of the most recognized mountaineers on planet Earth. So maybe the obsession with being a pro and having it as your job. Maybe it's a decoy to stop you being truly successful. I don't know.
It could be, but everyone has to get their drive from somewhere. And I get my drive from capturing the very best image that I can or producing the very best video that I can. And each year those skills improve, and each year I take better pictures or make a better video. And I think it's easier for me if I take pride in my work rather than the progress I've made with my social media accounts or something, because the internet can be an incredibly emotionally scarring place, and if you let it get to you, then it will drag you down. But instead I focus on the positive, which is the places I've been and the things that I've seen and how well I captured the emotion and the beauty of the place.
You know, the very best thing I've done in the past 18 months is employed somebody whose job it is to deal with the comments on my social media channels, on platforms, because I got very close on a couple of occasions to having had 2 glasses of wine, reading somebody's, pardon my language, but bitchy comment. And from somebody who's probably never done any more mountaineering or outdoors time than stumbling around their garden to go back to their couch. And I came a couple of occasions, to typing in that snarky response to them. And then I'm going to stop myself. And it came very close to clicking submit or go or clicking that button. At that point in time, I was like, no, I'm just going to have to let somebody else go and deal with this. Because... yeah, it gets quite personal, doesn't it?
It does. And there's a lot of keyboard warriors, just like you're saying on YouTube. But you have to let it roll off the back. And sometimes you can gain some really good insight from them. Sometimes their critical feedback is just what you need in order to make something better the next time. But it is true that sometimes it's just cruel and it's unhelpful. And you got to let it roll off your back.
I always say to people before we comment on things on social media, this is another rabbit hole that I will stop us going down too deeply. But you have to remember that person is immensely brave to start with, to take something and put it out there for the rest of the world to criticize, something that they're proud of, and something that they equally could have not given you the privilege to go and look at, be it image or video or audio. They could have just tucked it away for their own personal memories and not shared it. And so before we criticize, maybe we should congratulate their bravery. And then if we are going to criticize, maybe we should do it from a place of compassion as opposed to just that's crap. Or he doesn't or she doesn't know what they're talking about. I just think there's a degree of, would you be prepared to say the same thing to the person in a coffee shop face to face, looking them in the eyes? And if the answer's no, then maybe don't type it. Yeah, that's my advice to the world.
Yeah, I think if you're unwilling to say it to them in person, then it's so easy to forget that there is a face behind the profile picture, and you're not talking to a profile on the internet. You're talking to a person, and the world would be a much, much kinder and understanding place in all aspects, on YouTube, in politics, everywhere. I think that's great advice.
So I've busy announced to you and the world that I'd like to be known as the Joe Rogan of outdoor podcasting, maybe within the next 10 years. Whereabouts do we find Brandon in 10 years' time?
I don't know. I'll just continue to do the best that I can. And I don't know. Rick Steves is really fun. I think that his content is a lot more formal than I would like mine to be. But I really want people to experience the magic of a place, and to share in the experience that I had. And if I was able to produce a full film like the Oat Route every single year, then I think it would be very fun to have a collection of films on my YouTube channel where people can say, let's go to Scotland tonight and make some popcorn, or let's go see the cherry blossoms in Japan and have a glass of wine. that might I think that would just tickle me to know that people know that they could come to my channel and be entertained for an hour and feel like they had visited a place for an hour or an hour and a half.
Wow. And stuff like that is the start of moving from the couch to the aeroplane to putting your hiking boots on, or whatever it may well be, and getting out there. And I'm a firm believer that if we can inspire people to get out there more, people will look after what it is they learn to love, which is the outdoors. And that will probably or hopefully produce certainly a more sustainable planet for my kids and your kids into the future. If more people love it, I think they're far more likely to look after it.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I recently visited Arches National Park down in Moab, and there's an unbelievable number of people at the Arch when I arrived. But coming away from it that evening, I wasn't disappointed that it was a crowded place. Instead, I was really happy that there were people that wanted to get out and wanted to see the outdoors. And fortunately, Delicate Arch is an easily accessible place. And I was happy to see that people were visiting, even if they all take the same picture, even if they all kind of crowd in together. I was glad that they were there for that same reason. We're all out to enjoy the world, and if that's their step closer, all the more power to them.
I think so. Tony Robbins, the motivational coach, he once said something along the lines of, as opposed to asking, why has this happened to me, we should ask, why has this happened for me? And when I look at what COVID has done, you could say, why has this happened to us? But when you actually look at how many people have started accessing the outdoors because they've been told, you're not allowed to, you're on a lockdown, you're on a whatever else. And then when they suddenly realize they're not allowed to go in the outdoors, suddenly it becomes a thing that they want to do. And so you could say, actually, from the outdoors perspective, why has this happened for us? Well, actually, it's got more people out enjoying scenery, enjoying nature, enjoying wildlife. And maybe there is an upside to COVID despite the tragedy, who knows? But I think it certainly has had some benefits.
I think that people have realized just how boring their home is and how boring the internet and their social media accounts are. And it makes them want to see something new because they've had enough of the inside. Let's go see what the outside has to offer.
Yeah. At one point in time, you may well think that a few days of Netflix and just chilling out is exactly what you want. But if you've done weeks or months of just being stuck in with Netflix, it really isn't that great. Well, Brandon, thank you very much for your time today. And thank you so much for being able to share what it is that you experience in the outdoors through a lens of a camera so that other people can join you in that experience. I think that all too often in the outdoors, we think that to inspire people, maybe we have to climb an Everest or guide people or coach people. And actually what you're offering them is a small kick in the pants to get off the sofa and go and take that step to go and, even if it's not photograph it for themselves, it's to view it with their own eyes. And I think we need more people to go and help people transition from the couch to the car to a park somewhere to go and see with their own eyes what it is that you so amazingly share with us. So thanks for everything that you do. If people want to hang out with you, see your work, we've already covered where your film is, your documentary is, but where's the best places for them to come and cyberstalk you?
Well, I think the best place is probably my YouTube channel, but I do also have a website, which is brandonneubert.com. And that's where you can see all of my photography. I've written a couple of articles on there, but it's mostly a place to share the different images that I've taken in the past. And I also have an Instagram and a Facebook account, which are fun to contribute to. And yeah, thank you for asking. And as well to people who are watching this, I'm also going to leave Rob's channel down in the description below so that you can see more of these talks just like this one, and get a better grasp on what so many people's views on the outdoors and exploration are. And so you can find that down in the description as well.
Awesome. Very, very kind. And of course, all that usual stuff like and subscribe, that's really useful to us. But if
that's
not,
right.
That's it. Give it a big thumbs up. But if not, just go enjoy the world and go and check out Brandon's stuff and imagery, because it's mind-blowing. Thanks for your time today, Brandon.
Hey, thank you very much, Rob. It's been a pleasure.